Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Today we welcome Tomasz Płudowski, Deputy Dean at the School of Social Science, University of Economics and Human Sciences, to discuss the evolving dynamics of American politics. US President Donald Trump's latest narratives and declarations continue to polarize public opinion internationally, while Elon Musk's controversial management decisions at DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, spark intense debate. How are Americans reacting to Trump's behavior? What impact does Musk's leadership have on political discourse? And what does the Trump-Musk relationship signal for the future of US politics and media influence? Tomasz Płudowski, welcome and thank you for taking the time to join us.
Thank you for the invitation.
Okay, so, Trump is often thought of as being disruptor-in-chief, and he's certainly been disruptive in his just over a month. Impact on public opinion of what he's doing in general before we get to specifics?
Well, it's clear that as time progresses, he's more and more popular among the American public, and it's not him, but the Democratic Party that has a problem getting the support of the Americans. I think people see Trump as, especially, you usually divide the electorate into three groups: the supporters, the opponents, and those in the middle, or the undecideds. But generally, you see a clear tendency that he is more and more popular. Basically, well, depending on the poll, The Economist, for example, says that is an exception here, says that there's slightly more opponents than supporters, but generally, if you take the average of the polls, I think the supporters exceed the opponents by more or less 2 percentage points. So
what's behind this?
I think people generally want a strong leader. The times are very difficult. There has been a number of challenges globally. From the pandemic to international conflicts, the war, people feel threatened, people are losing jobs, businesses, and so on. So I think they want a strong leader, someone who at least seems like he delivers, or at least has ideas, makes them feel comfortable.
Right, which they weren't getting under Biden, I assume.
For a variety of reasons, some of them very superficial, the way he came across, physically.
Right.
He seemed much more feeble, even though they're more or less the same age. He seemed much more feeble, so that doesn't make people feel safe, I think.
Understood. Now, a number of elements of the population voted for Trump, and the proportion of votes from each element increased. I'd like to focus on the Polish diaspora in America. Trump had a very high rating, from them. But since then, of course, there have been talks or Poles being deported because of out-of-state visas or what have you. What is the current support for Trump amongst the Polish diaspora?
There's more or less 10 million Americans, Polish Americans, depending on whether they are first generation, second, or third generation. There's generally two groups: Americans people that feel that they are Polish Americans, but they don't really speak Polish and they don't have close ties with Poland, and then the other group that is not very well assimilated into the society, and they don't have the right to vote in many cases in the US. They don't have citizenship, and they feel much closer to Poland, and they have the right to vote in Polish elections, in consulates and so on and so forth. I don't think there's, so it depends on how you look, who you take into consideration as Polish diaspora, but we're talking about Poles that are under the threat of being deported, probably, so those that do not have American citizenship. And a lot of them are, depending obviously on the education and different demographics, they fall into two categories. One is much more liberal, and they are generally much better assimilated, and the other one is much more conservative. And I think those conservative Poles like Trump as a personality. They like his ideas, they like his politics, they like what he says about society, and I think they like his the way that he's more about order And when you ask them what they think about the US, they often say things like, well, we don't want chaos in this country, we don't want foreigners, even though they are themselves, in many cases, obviously from the American point of view, if they don't have American citizenship, they are foreigners as well. But they don't think of themselves as those outgroups. They think of other groups as outgroups. But they consider themselves part of the, I don't know, the West, the white demographic. They think that they have the right to be there, and they are not the problem. So obviously they have a problem looking at themselves from the outside perspective.
Understand.
So they I think generally they support his ideas, they support his politics, as far as the effects do not consider them,
impact them directly.
Yes.
Just very briefly, actually, if you just finish that thought off, many people believe that Trump is being unfair towards Ukraine.
Yes.
And clearly that is a strong emotion here in Poland. Does that emotion translate to the Polish diaspora in America?
I'd say that it depends. Generally speaking, they are more interested. Well, it's difficult to talk about society as a coherent group.
Absolutely.
Right? If you look at, especially being a sociologist, you have to look at different demographics. And generally speaking, there are those two groups. One is interested more in international affairs, looks in a global scale, is more interested in politics. And the other one is more interested in individual, or is more guided by individual advantages or benefits, right? And I think that a lot of those people look at, especially if they support Trump, they're not that interested in the situation of Ukraine, and they don't think of the situation in geopolitical terms. But still, Poles, if compared to other nationalities, they are more aware of the history, right? Of the history that Poland is in a situation, could be next, not literally, but after Estonia, Moldova, and so on and so forth, right?
Okay.
So I think we are in a good position to kind of make the rest of the world, especially Western European governments and politicians who are a bit naive, I would say, especially in the younger generation. When they look at Ukraine, they don't realize the threats that are there.
The level of the threat.
Yes, the level of the threat, and they are kind of naive and take for granted what Putin is saying.
I'd like to move on now to Elon Musk and DOGE. Clearly, he seems to have put the cat amongst the pigeons. Lots of cuts being made in government, which actually, it must be said, very similar to what he did when he took over Twitter, where 75% or 80% of his staff were culled. What is the impression amongst the American public of these cuts?
Well, again, this is not a solid group, but generally, I think what Trump and Musk is doing, or are doing, they can get away with it because the American public is different from the European public, in that it's a federal system. So American voters, especially Republican voters, tend to think of the federal government very negatively as an additional government that is more far away from their daily experience, something that is unnecessary, something that is bureaucratic. So this idea of limiting bureaucracy and limiting expenses just fits nicely into their worldview.
Right.
And even though it's not being successful, the way Musk manages the DOGE department, they probably think that this is a good idea in general, regardless of how it's being executed. But if you know management, if you look at what he's saying, sending those emails, it's counterproductive. I mean, he was supposed to diminish bureaucracy, and he actually increases bureaucracy. He makes everyone send emails, explain in detail every week what they've done. Then somebody obviously would have to, for it to make sense, somebody would have to read all those emails. So it increases bureaucracy. Somebody would have to keep track of those answers, somehow turn them into numbers, for it to matter in any way. It's micromanagement, it's more bureaucracy, and I think it's counterproductive. But it's being played, the way they are doing it, I think is effective in terms of increasing It's good PR for them. It
Right.
seems like he's doing something, even though he hasn't really done much.
So you're talking about the email saying list the 5 things you did yesterday and see. Yes, I mean, one of the arguments I heard was that he was doing it to find out. He said there are lots of so-called ghost government employees, and he wanted to know if they actually exist as well.
What does it say about the government? If the government doesn't know that if their employees are actually coming to work?
Well, quite. It's such a huge infrastructure, bureaucracy, it's difficult to tell.
But
how would you characterize the relationship between Trump and Musk? Because a lot has been said about this. Is there a tension that you sense?
There's probably competition. I mean, there's healthy competition between 2 adult males who have achieved a lot, and probably alpha males in many ways. They're showmen, both of them. They have achievements. They've had failures, probably Trump more than Musk. But I think they understand each other, and they understand at this point, still yet, that they can benefit. There's more to benefit from mutual cooperation than they can compete. But I don't think that Trump is threatened by Musk. He cannot step into his shoes. Musk cannot become president either because he was born in South Africa. So
he wasn't elected either. I mean,
sure.
He's an employee after all, or
yes.
consultant.
So I think they are good showmen. They captured the attention of the viewers. So far, they're being effective. I think that the general public, the Americans, are more. They support Trump more than Musk,
So do you see them being complementary throughout Trump's term, or do you see at some stage the possibility, I suppose I'm asking you to look in the crystal ball here, a possibility of some kind of friction, some kind of conflict between the two, especially when it comes to the midterm elections, for example?
I think since they occupy different spheres, Trump is more about politics and the other one is more about business. I think they don't have to get into each other's ways, but they both have strong egos. They can easily have a falling out because of their egos. So and it's a very subtle area. If one of them crosses the line, especially Musk crosses the line with Trump can, take it personally. Although I think he has it in him to forgive.
Yeah.
For example, Vance. If you look at what Vance said about him, saying that he's a potential Hitler and things like that, he can easily forget if he sees a lot of interest in it. So I see them working for the next couple months together.
Okay. Excellent. Well, thank you very much indeed for joining us, Mr. Płudowski, and sharing your expertise with our audience. Have a good day.
Thank you.
And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.